welcome to Good Game, the show for gamers by gamers. I'm Barjo.
And I'm Hex. Welcome back, Barjo. E3 looked amazing.
It was amazing, Hex, and of course we didn't have time to show everything we asked the developers, so we will be putting those full interviews online in our E3 vault over the coming weeks. There's already a couple up there, including David Cage from Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls.
This week on the show, we journey to Westeros with the new Game of Thrones RPG.
It's a dark day for the Night's Watch.
I know. Winter is coming.
Plus, quirky developer Suda51 is back with the Grindhouse-style zombie romp Lollipop Chainsaw.
Okay! And gamers of Australia can finally celebrate the successful passing of a legislation to introduce an R18 plus rating for video games. Yay! So Goose will take us back over the decade-long struggle and meet some of the heroes of the campaign.
But first, can you guess the game for this week?
You're pretty.
I don't feel pretty.
Okay, Barjo, get back to that news desk.
Good game.
Game developer Cal Henderson, co-founder of TinySpec, has extracted files and textures from Blizzard's MMO World of Warcraft to create entirely functional Slippy maps of the game's sprawling world using the Google Maps API. Calling the project World of Mapcraft, Henderson has detailed the lengthy technical process as well as bits of trivia found embedded in the files on his personal blog. The South Korean government has banned the trade of virtual items. The country's Culture, Sports and Tourism Ministry has said the move is necessary to help crack down on teenage crime, and that virtual items and gold farming bots are a hindrance to creating a healthy game culture. Anyone found to violate the new law could face up to 5 years in jail and a $50,000 fine. A PowerPoint document that is supposed to contain details of Microsoft's next Xbox strategy and Connect 2 for the next 3 years has leaked. The document referred to an Xbox 720 supporting Blu-ray, true 1080p 3D gaming, a device dubbed Fortaleza glasses providing augmented reality gaming over 4G, and more. Microsoft has quashed the leak as rumour and speculation. The document has now been removed at the request of an international legal firm representing the industry giant.
Good game.
Juliet Starling is having a bad day. Her cheerleading squad failed to win nationals for the 3rd year in a row. She's late to meet her boyfriend Nick, who is like totally dreamy. And to top it all off, her high school has been completely overrun by zombies. Luckily for Juliet, she has a well-kept secret. Zombie massacre is what she does best.
I'm a zombie hunter.
Lollipop Chainsaw is the latest wacky offering from Suda51 and his development team at Grasshopper Manufacture, and it sees our perky protagonist leaping and cheering her way through zombie hordes, all while wielding a chainsaw. And of course, chomping on a lollipop when she needs to pick me up. It's the kind of crass, zany humour we've come to expect from Suda51, all centred around a combo-heavy brawler with stars aplenty and rainbows.
I have to say, when I picked up this game, I really thought I'd hate it. Juliet Starling is everything that's wrong with the way women are portrayed in gaming.
I just found a stray dog and it's so cute. Do you think Mom...
And while I shudder to think that girls everywhere could be leaping up to cosplay as Juliet instead of FemShep at conventions, this game really did make me laugh.
Yeah, it's crass, isn't it? But it's actually quite funny at times.
Yeah, the humour's not all bad, especially after something like Shadows of the Damned, one of Suda51's other games, which was really unsavoury.
Now that is a big boner.
Ugh. I mean, by comparison, this game was fairy floss. It's a parody of itself, and Juliet, ditzy and scantily clad as she is, still manages to kick some serious butt in the process with goofy jokes at every turn.
And quit making fun of Stephen Hawking. He's a great man, you perv.
And in true Suda style, this game is weird. Like, mega weird.
Upon failing to make it to her boyfriend in time, Juliet watches as Nick is bitten by a zombie and realises that there is no hope for him to survive. Unless Juliet performs a ritual magic spell taught to her by her father that will preserve Nick's decapitated head, that she then can choose to wear as a belt accessory for the rest of the game. It's a classic tale.
What?
Juliet Juliet's focus is on tearing her way through as many zombies as possible, using a combination of kicks, flips, cheers, and pom-pom bashes, along with some hefty and acrobatic swings of her chainsaw. Dead zombies will give up medals, and so will saving students in danger. And you'll use these to unlock more complex and heavier hitting combos.
Click, click.
I thought these looked really great. Chaining together your cheerleader attacks with low spins, thrusts, and windmill moves really made a mess of the fray. And the more combos you use, the more medals will drop from zombies, and you can buy even more. I found the chainsaw was a bit slow though, Hex, just in the action of it.
Yeah, well, it is a heavy weapon to use though. It's got some weight behind it.
I know, but I felt like that stilted the action a little bit, and it made it a bit button mashy as you're trying to catch up to what's going on. And if you don't time your attacks correctly, combos can be interrupted by some fairly heavy-hitting zombie attacks.
There's a decent variety of zombie enemies too. Some zombies will be strapped with explosives. Policemen zombies have guns, zombies that fly, and some will charge you as well. Getting a hit in to break a charge or working out which moves will take out a heavy zombie with just one hit is really fun, and it makes those sore fingers you get from mashing buttons really worthwhile, not to mention your rank at the end of each level.
Completely awesome. So what?
Later on, you'll also pick up a chainsaw attachment that turns it into a gun, with bullets that crop up from time to time when you need them most. And my favourite was a more powerful version of the gun called the Nick Popper, which is a one-off attack you can gamble for, allowing you to shoot Nick's head at zombies from a rainbow funnel.
Killing zombies also gives Juliet star power, and when you fill up a meter, you can execute a rainbow attack for a bit of extra cheer-tastic spirit. It's ridiculous, but you know, there's always something even more ridiculous and wacky around the next corner, so I don't know, I was strangely hooked by this game.
Yeah, it's relentlessly bizarre, isn't it? You travel to all these weird, disjointed, odd locations, which all center around the game's bosses, which brings us to the source of the zombie outbreak. Outcast and bullied teen goth Swan has decided to lash out after the way he was treated during high school by opening up a portal to a rotten zombie dimension. This causes everyone in and around San Romero High to be affected. Unless Juliet is able to stop 5 rock god-inspired mega zombie villains, the portal will stay open forever.
Your journey to victory is like one long, sweaty, fever-induced hallucination. I mean, some levels will take you to a farm where you're plowing through zombies on a tractor or shooting at them from the roof of a bus. Other times you'll be facing off against a giant Viking boss on a floating ship. There's giant angry chickens. Then you're in a video game arcade getting teleported Tron-style inside arcade games, or fighting a weird disco zombie boss on a UFO in space.
I loved all the wackiness of it, Hex, but some parts got a bit gimmicky and repetitive at times. The on-rails sections where you're shooting rocks out of your way, or the numerous chainsaw dash areas, which were often a bit awkward to maneuver, they just felt like filler. There's a bit too much padding. I would have rather spent that time learning new ways to take down zombies.
Oh, I love the chainsaw dash, especially over rooftops. For me, this game is just so erratically different from one moment to the next that, you know, I wanted to keep playing just to find out what it was going to throw at me next. Breaking things up with those high school sporting stages like zombie baseball or zombie basketball kept it interesting for me. Although movement can be a bit awkward at times, performing an acrobatic move to jump up onto something or through a window needs to be lined up perfectly in order for that animation to play out, and that really takes me out of the game and emphasises the linear nature of the levels. Although I thought the use of quick time events was perfect. It's just enough to keep you on your toes.
Look out!
I didn't mind the quick time events that popped up in the midst of battle, but those minigames where you have to put Nick's head on a zombie just to get him from one side of the room to another, they just felt like they were wasting my time, and they were a bit annoying.
Yeah, thankfully those didn't go on for too long. I was really impressed with the overall design of this game. It just oozes style, even in the loading screens. And that wacky story and humour just somehow ties it all together. There's also a seriously great soundtrack here, with each song being carefully chosen to reflect Juliet's personality or her surroundings.
I like the boss fights, most of them, especially the one with the hippie that kept splitting herself into little bits. It's just a shame that last boss fight was so predictable when all the others were so wacky and crazy.
The only time I ever really cringed in this game was occasionally with the taste level. I mean, I don't mind Juliet. She's silly and ditzy, but she certainly isn't a damsel and seriously packs a punch. But she's also a walking cliche and will go on about calories or how fat she thinks she is. And while I can deal with the stripper pole, saving students in school will sometimes earn you this thanks.
I never thought I'd be saved by someone with such great tits.
Yes, and it's hard to find an unlockable outfit that isn't insanely revealing. What bothered me most, though, was all the up-the-skirt shots. I mean, is this what the developer thinks we really want to see? Lots of accentuated shots where you're looking at panties?
Douchebags!
Yeah, it's part of that whole Japanese sexy innocent appeal, isn't it? I mean, I feel like maybe in Western culture we have a few different versions of what sexy can be, but, you know, in games like this it tends to be short skirts and panties every time.
Yeah, I think that's true, but I still think it's really creepy, and I think after the content in their last game, this developer needs to think a little bit more deeply about what they're putting in and what they're doing for video games with this kind of stuff.
I agree. That said, Juliet's relationship with her zombie hunting family and decapitated boyfriend is strangely heartwarming and genuine.
Dad, this is...
Nick, I know. You told me all about it. Failed to mention the, disability.
In the end, I found it impossible not to stay entertained with Lollipop Chainsaw because it's constantly changing and inventing trippy new scenarios for you to swing your chainsaw at. I'm gonna put the old feminist rant aside this time and say I'm surprised at how much fun I had with this. I'm giving it 7.5.
I think I didn't like it as much as you, Hex. I found it frustrating at times and too repetitive, and I felt like it was just an odd collection of bonus stages as opposed to a fully fleshed out game. So I'm giving it 6 out of 10. Really just made me want a new Buffy game. Wouldn't that be cool? A gritty Buffy reboot.
You and Buffy.
Everyone in Buffy.
Okay, beta released.
Wow, I think I actually care about this.
This game rules!
Okay guys, we've still got heaps of work to do. Hello?
Yeah, g'day Troy, it's Dick Smart here from Corporate Games Publisher. Congratulations on A Hero's Journey, it's fantastic. Look Troy, we'd like to publish the game for you, help take it to Alpha.
Tell them to piss off.
Sorry about that.
Say no, Troy, they'll stuff it up.
Yeah, man, they'll lame it up so bad.
Hang up the phone. Just think about it, Troy, this is your chance to really be somebody. Be somebody. Be somebody.
I wanna be somebody.
Don't worry everyone, this won't change a thing.
Well, maybe just a few tweaks.
Hi, I'm an alcoholic.
Good game.
Last week saw the culmination of years of hard work by politicians, gamers and the industry to make changes and amendments to the Australian Classification Bill.
Well, I think it's just common sense. We've got an R18 category for movies. We need one for games as well. Australia is the only Western country in the world that doesn't have an R18 category for games. Now we do. My first game was Donkey Kong when I was 10 years old. I remember the old Commodore 64. The games I played 30 years ago are a bit different to the games that are played now. But you've got a lot of politicians here in Canberra that play games. 90% of homes have got computer games in them. So just like the people in homes all around the country, politicians play computer games as well. So we get it. We understand that this is a pretty common sense reform.
Just do what you have to do.
I always do, Sam. I always do.
The average age of gamers in Australia is in the low 30s. When these guidelines were first put in 1995, I was 12 years old. Now I'm nearly 30. And these are the sorts of games that I want to play. I want to play games that challenge me, that confront me.
This isn't gonna work. You're not hearing me.
In 1993, Night Trap horrified Senator Margaret Reynolds, sparking her to launch a campaign to restrict access to mature video games. A year later, the National Classifications Act was passed. All video games for sale in Australia would now require a classification from G up to MA15+. The first proposed amendment to the Act to include an R18 classification for adults was in 2002. So why then did it take so long?
The way the classification system works to get it changed in Australia is each state and territory has to agree unanimously to change it. So that's 8 different people with different opinions, different moral codes coming together and saying, yes, I think we need an R18 rating for games.
You have to help me, please.
And also, of course, there was a lot of change in Parliament. So we had Michael Atkinson, who was the South Australian Attorney General, who was very opposed to R18.
No one may leave the city by order of the Inquisitor.
And at that time, during his tenure, he was the only minister who didn't want to vote for R18. And obviously, it couldn't pass without his approval.
Pretty much as soon as he stepped down, I think everything started to escalate. That was around the time of the public submission that the federal government had put out, which received, I think it was 60,000 responses, was staggeringly in favour of an R18 rating. I think 98% in favour of an R18 rating. So this was obviously an issue that had really resonated with, sort of gamers in Australia.
And around the same time, we saw real activity about talking about the issue, but much more in depth. Why is it important? What does an R18 mean? What does an absence of it mean? I think there was a great collision at that time between the media really taking an interest. The consumers changed their view as well. Then we had some, website activity, different blogs were going, and I think it was just that perfect collision of all of us at the same time reaching a conclusion that it's about time we took a nice concerted effort.
This is one of the interesting things about the debates that you have in Canberra. Normally there's people strongly in favour of something and some people that are strongly against the sort of laws we want to put through the parliament. This is one of those debates where both sides of politics agreed, and I think the reason they agreed was because we had so many people from across the country that were campaigning for this. When 98% of people tell you this is the right thing to do, I think most politicians realise it's a smart thing to do.
Finally, it begins.
From the 1st of January, I expect that a lot of gaming companies will put games forward for classification, and then it's up to the classification board to do that work quickly so that we can get games onto the shelves. If there's a game that's been refused classification in the past, it's allowed to be reconsidered for classification again 2 years after it's been refused classification. An important point to make here is that we're still going to have a refused classification category, just like you have for movies that you might want to see.
Tonight, Papa's Palace of Pain.
Now that the federal government has agreed on the R18 amendment, it's still up to each individual state and territory to decide how they want to implement and enforce it. And while we're all celebrating this landmark decision, we do need to understand that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
While all states and territories seem to be on board with R18. We have heard in the past that South Australia, for example, is planning to or is thinking about abolishing the MA15 plus category, which will create a really big problem for how games are imported and sold and distributed in South Australia. So if you think about it, having an MA15 plus across the board in every single state and territory except South Australia is going to create a little bit of a problem for the industry.
It's really just a decision that South Australia would have to make. We've passed the law to create the R18 plus category, and my department here in Canberra has got a role in monitoring that and also making sure that it's all rolled out nice and smoothly between now and the 1st of January next year.
I think the amount of time that this has actually taken to come through the Senate has resulted in people meeting the news with a bit of cynicism. So now that there have to be complementary legislation put through the state parliaments, people are sort of, they're expecting that to go wrong. They're expecting something to go wrong there.
I think it's just a matter of getting it done. Canberra has already passed the legislation. A lot of other states have it in various states. So it's really a matter of just getting this thing done and getting it all done in time.
Extraction complete.
Now that the R18 issue is out of the way, what it allows us to do is focus on probably a much bigger issue or a series of issues. So now we can focus on, what needs to be classified in the future? How do we classify it? Is online and offline the same? There's a whole number of classification questions that really need deep examination and lots of thought. And we're looking forward to now having that conversation with other stakeholders and with the government.
We had the Australian Law Reform Commission have a look at our classification system. It hasn't been overhauled really for about 15 years, and they've come back to me with about 57 recommendations on things we can do to update our classification system, reflect the fact that we're in the 21st century now, not the 20th century, and I'm having a good look at that, so stay tuned, there might be more on the way.
It just feels like a really cool victory for common sense, firstly, but also it's sort of a testament to what gamers can do as a collective if they really focus on one specific issue and focus their energies towards something. It sort of feels like a little bit of an achievement unlocked for gamers, I think, R18 rating, 1 million gamer points.
By
Barjo, not since Lord of the Rings has a medieval fantasy franchise taken hold of the world so completely. It seems like just about every conversation you walk in on these days, someone is talking about George R.R. Martin's novels-turned-TV epic Game of Thrones. We had an RTS pop up a little while ago, but it was only a matter of time before a full-scale RPG based on the franchise hit our shelves.
Yes, and I have to say, I was a bit nervous about this one. We're both big Game of Thrones fans, and even the box art was a little dicey. But the moment I booted it up and I heard that iconic Game of Thrones theme play, I was a little bit reassured. This is Game of Thrones. Surely they're not going to mess this up.
Yeah, but they did, though, didn't they? I mean, the game is horrible.
Yes, it's truly awful.
Shit. The game serves as a kind of prequel set right before the events of the books and the TV series. It follows the storylines of two playable characters. Mors, a hardened ranger of the Night's Watch, charged with defending Castle Black from wildlings while uncovering a sinister betrayal.
You brought this traitor back. I knew I could count on you.
And Alistair, a red priest from Bravos who's on a journey to King's Landing to reclaim his right as lord of his hometown, River Spring. Their storylines are initially quite separate, but slowly start to arc towards each other through some very long, tedious conversations.
Visually, you can see it's not the best looking game out there, and that gives you an idea of the smaller development team and budget that they're working with.
Bastard crows! You're all out of your heads!
Character models are pretty rough around the edges, scenery and locations are rather bland, but worst of all are the robotic animations.
My priority is to get my titles back. I will find a way to stop the marriage.
For an RPG, your character customization options are quite extensive by way of stats, but not much else. I mean, fair enough, you're playing set characters, so you're not going to have a say in what they look like too much, but beyond that, you can only choose from 3 class options, which will ultimately determine your fighting style and the kind of weapons you can use.
The combat here reminded me a lot of Dragon Age Origins, but it's far from being that sophisticated or reactive. As you level up, you'll gain combat abilities which you queue up by entering a radial menu with one of the bumper buttons. You can queue up to 3 attacks at once, and then the fight just plays out automatically. The whole system felt really sluggish to me.
Yeah, and you also run out of energy really quickly, so you can queue up a rest action, but you can only use that every 20 seconds. Half the time you're just sitting there on auto attack waiting until you can do something, remotely interesting. I mean, I could not have imagined a more boring combat system if I tried, Barjo.
Also, the class that you choose can often be quite restrictive as it limits you to only a handful of weapons that you can use with your abilities. For example, I made my Mors a Hedge Knight, which said he can master both ranged and melee combat, but prefers two-handed weapons. But once I started playing, I found I could only use my abilities if I had a two-handed weapon equipped. If I had something else equipped, I'd just go on the auto stab and there'd be no stat drop or anything, but I couldn't use any of my abilities.
Yeah, I had the same issue when I was playing as Alistair, because I made him an archer, which I thought would make him pretty handy from a distance with some cool bow attacks. Like in Dragon's Dogma, I had some awesome ranged attacks in that, but there is essentially no ranged combat in this game. Being an archer means you automatically go into close combat fights with a bow and arrow and fire various arrow attacks point blank at a group of guys that are hacking at you with swords. I mean, what were they thinking? And what's even more stupid is this arrow off I had with one NPC. We were both firing arrows at each other point blank. I mean, in the game, this is apparently a successful fighting technique for me, but I'm sorry, it's beyond stupid.
Yeah, it's pretty silly. Fighting also feels a bit disjointed because of this queuing system. It breaks any flow you have in a fight. There is a time-slowing technique in play when you choose your abilities, but since you can only queue 3 at a time, you're constantly going into this radial menu, and the effect is really stilted. And it might sound a bit nitpicky, but I hate having to push the button to get out of that menu again. I've selected my ability, just go with it. It would have been nice to be able to map those to different buttons or the D-pad. That would have helped the flow of things.
Yeah, it gets quite messy too in some of those close-quartered areas with lots of camera obstructions. There are a few nice finishes though. While King's Landing felt a little small and the throne room less grandiose than we remember it, the snowy forested areas of the north felt wild and dangerous with some pockets of nice scenery and lighting. Also, Mors has a nifty ability that'll see you spending a large portion of your time in dog mode.
I liked dog mode. It was funny sniffing about through the grass, tracking scents of enemies, or looking for buried treasure. And it added a nice stealth component too, as it allowed you to take out unsuspecting mercs one by one, so that Moors could waltz through the camp, party in tow, without ever having to get his sword dirty.
Yeah, and when playing as Moors, you can also have your dog fight in battle with you, and he has his own set of doggy combat abilities that you can invoke in battle for some extra help, like this cool battle bark.
Really though, the strength of this game is in its story. Incidental characters along the way get the classic Game of Thrones treatment.
I'll see you on the other side.
Mercy.
And I felt it was true to George Martin's canon. There has clearly been a lot of love and effort poured into the game's plot. It's well written for the most part and cleverly involves the two main protagonists who are working towards seemingly different goals.
Yeah, the game feels as though it's at least been written by the most hardcore of Game of Thrones fans, because it really sings of that rich lore that takes us below the surface of what we know from the TV series. That being said, the conversations are so long-winded that you'll be asleep before the end of just about every interaction.
She ensures his loyalty and increases her power.
But Valar was just a...
Seeing him, no matter how he cursed him, apparently...
A maester can...
He never became... He was then... His reputation... He moves it...
Valar.
There is... I do not...
Are you sure?
Believe me, Alistair, I know this subject.
Yeah, I think this wins for most skipped dialogue in a game ever, maybe. They have wrangled some of the actors from the team. Pretty good voice actors. Conleith Hill, who plays Varys, he's excellent, but others are not so good.
The cheap wine they serve at the Orr House knocked him right out.
Well, in particular, the two main guys. I mean, Moors has a great voice, but it sounds like he'd be much better suited to doing voiceovers for movie trailers.
Who is your master? It's my neck on the line. I want to know who I'm dealing with.
Then Alistair is just plain bad.
But there are rumors of a possible culprit.
Tell me who it is.
There are some horribly cliched moments as well.
Not to mention some terrifying glitches. I mean, it's hard enough just trying to focus on some of these conversations when, holy crap, what is that? I also love that in every conversation, it seems the only animation available was this sassy hand-on-hip movement. It's always there and it's so unnatural. There it is again.
Give a kettle of piss.
And there. Sometimes naked. Double hand on hip. And my personal favorite, stab someone, then hand on hip.
Death is still death.
Well, Hex, I think we should definitely wrap this up.
And so do I. Well, this is such a disappointing turnout for a game attached to such a widely loved franchise. This goes beyond the usual movie tie-in issue that we're normally faced with. I have heard a rumor that the dev company actually bought the rights to this before the TV series was made and before it became so popular. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but it would explain why we didn't see something bigger and more impressive come out with, well, more money behind it.
Yeah, I think the reason why it feels so disappointing and kind of embarrassing is because we love Game of Thrones so much. We just want to see that done justice. Imagine if this had a budget behind it, you know? Game of Thrones would work for video games if it was done right. I think they were a bit overambitious here. I think they tried really hard in some ways, but they just didn't have either the time or the money behind it to make it what they wanted it to be. So I'm going to give it 3 out of 10.
I'm giving it 3 as well.
Good game. So did you guess the game for this week?
It was Killer 7, written and directed by Suda51. This violent noir game was praised for its originality and brave design.
Next week, we'll be dimension jumping through the new puzzler Quantum Conundrum.
We'll also be visiting the Game Masters exhibition at the Australian Centre for the Moving Image in Melbourne and chatting to the VIP devs they managed to lure down under to launch it.
Over on Spawn Point this weekend, we'll be breaking a sweat with London 2012.
Thanks for tweeting, everyone. Till next time, Hex out.
Barjo out as well.